Good morning. After this great start, let's begin, and I will right away invite here to this place our distinguished panelist, Aleš Bialitski from Belarus. Aleš was the winner of this prize in 2014. What was interesting that when he won, he was in jail, and now he is here and frequent visitor to Prague. Then I would like to ask Anar Mammadli. Anar Mammadli is another winner of Václav Havel Human Rights Prize 2015. When he won the prize, he was in jail. He was released from jail in March this year, and I can welcome you here. And we have Gordana Igric. She was already here. Hopefully, she has not disappeared. Gordana, are you here? Very well. She already has been introduced, great Serbian journalist. And certainly last but not least, Saso Ordanoski, journalist from Macedonia. So,
he haven't been in jail yet.
Okay, hopefully we will.
But it's never too late.
Never too late, never too late. Okay, so just to set the stage for this debate, let me make a couple of general remarks and historical reminiscences. This panel's name is East of Eden. So what brings to our attention is the perspective. Human rights activists like to see things from universal point of view, something shared by everybody. But perspective means, as Michael Žantovský said, that everybody is from somewhere, and everybody is looking at the situation from his own point of view. So we have the perspective east of the West. What does it mean? My historical reminiscences. I remember very well when the revolution here came in 1989, and it was based on our active participation in the Helsinki process that was bringing us together, East and the West. And obviously the role of civil society, human rights activists in this transition was important, was crucial. And then the idea appeared, which was called Helsinki from below, which was the idea to complement the process taking place between the governments and diplomats and politicians with the activism of civil society. It started a little bit, was transformed into institution, for instance, called Helsinki Citizens Assembly, and then obviously it disappeared for some reasons. Interestingly enough, what you have here, me and the panelists, are citizens of 3 states that disappeared after 1989. I was citizen of Czechoslovakia, and now the Czech Republic. We have here 2 citizens of now former Yugoslavia, and the tragedy of former Yugoslavia in the beginning of 1992 is something what we should be talking about. And we have here citizens, 2 states that emerged on the map after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Belarus and Azerbaijan. Obviously, from our perspective, the building of new political architecture after 1989 then was turned into our return to the West, return to Europe, or our fast integration to the Western structures like NATO and European Union. There was idea, I think it was President Bush who once said that Europe whole and free, which meant that all European countries should be part of that system with the same values, same security guarantees. But what we see now is a certain achievement on this front, but countries observing, participating in this process from their own perspective. So it would be very interesting, I think, now to hear from them how they are seeing that process, which certainly has not left them behind entirely, but put them into a slightly different situation. And now we are in the middle of the process of globalization, with all these things we already heard concerning terrorism and refugee problem. It's interesting for international lawyers that it's very difficult now even to agree on a simple definition what terrorism is, on a simple definition what aggression is, and on many other things. We have a concept of illiberal democracy. I think that some of participants here have their own very personal experience with what it means. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to ask you, how do you see, from your perspective, all these discussions we are part of today, with flows of refugees coming from other parts of the world, with you being, in one case, the part of near abroad of the Russian Federation, in the case of former Yugoslavia, still struggling with your own tragic experiences in the beginning of the 1990s. Now we are in 2016, so I would like to ask you to share with us your perspective in this very moment. We will start from the left and go to the right. So Aleš, you are the first.
I will speak Russian, sorry. Незнание английского языка – это вот еще одно наследие Советского Союза, когда мы...
I don't speak English, and this is perhaps the heritage from the time when we lived behind the Iron Curtain and English seemed as distant as Japanese or other exotic languages. Migration crisis is perceived as very worrying, especially in the last 2 years. It affects our internal and foreign policy in all Eastern European countries. When I read the name of our panel, East of Eden, I immediately recalled that the Bible speaks both about Eden and purgatory. Purgatory is meant as something between Eden and hell. And this is what Eastern European countries remind me of, purgatory. There are many good things, but also many bad things. This crisis has instilled fears in us. We are watching the EU undergo a big test, the test of European values that had been perceived as a bonding agent. And it is clear that every EU member countries is trying to deal with the crisis in its own way. The common policy is not well coordinated. Quite unexpectedly, we are witnessing phobias, fears, when confronting strangers, people who are different from us. There is a growth of populism, nationalism. There is Brexit. Authoritarian regimes east of the EU are actively using this situation, criticizing European values, human rights. They do not acknowledge the universal nature of human rights, and they are trying to undermine the EU from within. Putin's regime is very active on the territory of the EU, supporting both the extreme right, for example, in France, and the extreme left, for example, in Germany. These powers do not acknowledge European values and are calling for destruction of the EU. Right-wing parties in Hungary are also very critical of Brussels. I'm surprised that all 28 countries which are represented in Brussels, in fact, are criticizing themselves. But who is benefiting? Who is happy because of all this? Of course, it's Putin and Lukashenko. The Eastern European regimes need to be independent for the uncanny acts they are trying to establish new steps like European and Asian Economic Community and other organizations that are being established as a counterbalance to the EU. These new groups do not care to mention human rights at all. So the new Eastern European politics is highly anti-European, and a lot of money is being spent to fight human rights. There is a propaganda conducted in Russian across a vast space. It is an ideological weapon. The conflicts that we observe between our countries, which would have seemed impossible a short time ago, like, for example, the war in Ukraine, provoked by Russia. 140,000 refugees arrived in Belarus, and there are about 2 million refugees from Ukraine. There is Dnestria, Abkhazia, South Ossetia. The people have stopped talking about human rights there. The people are fearing for their lives in the so-called Lugan People's Republics. They have reinstated capital penalty. So Belarus is not the last country to use the capital punishment. And Russia has its own platform for the fight against human rights. That is Chechnya. We don't see an open hot war, but there is a dictator regime, and there are many refugees from Chechnya, but they won't be allowed into the EU countries. The reason is simple. Europe tells the refugees from Chechnya, there is no war in Chechnya, stay where you belong. This all undermines European policy, and it undermines human rights and democracy in our countries east of the EU. Our politicians are ready to close their eyes for the sake of stability. They are willing to forget about human rights in Belarus and Azerbaijan. Václav Havel wrote in the 1980s that the history of Czechoslovakia has stopped. We have a similar feeling that the history in our countries has stopped. Nobody is killing people. There are no mass persecutions. But apart from that, all the life has stopped. So this is what's going on east of Eden.
Prosím, Anar Mammadli.
First of all, it's a great honor for me to be part of this ceremony and to attend Václav Havel Library's event today. Unfortunately, I missed to attend Unfortunately, I missed to attend 2014 events here in terms of my time in jail. But now I would like on behalf of me and my family and share my gratitude for all organizers that they pay attention at that time. So following Ales Bialitski point, what's happened in post-Soviet countries, I would like also confirm the current concerns in terms of EU policy in post-Soviet countries, especially in eastern part of this continent. When after collapse of Soviet Union, the many national conflicts became in post-Soviet countries, including Abkhazia, Ossetia, Moldovan, Transnistrian problems, in Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And then later, a new established post-Soviet dictatorship and many massive repressions started in the beginning of 19th. And many experts shared common opinion that the EU and the Western countries, they were not ready the collapse of Soviet Union. And when the new emergency situation became in East, when many refugees, massive refugees, they just left their countries and through transit countries like Turkey, Greece to Europe, again same common opinion shared by experts, by some think tanks that the EU was not ready for this problem. However, we know that EU had some point of quota for accepting refugees from its territory. So now talking about the migration, it's not concrete that what kind of migration can treat Europe, or how this problem, the migrants, they decide to leave their countries. So observing past political process in post-Soviet countries, I can share that just very minor part of migrants who left post-Soviet countries, it was as a result of conflicts, ethnic conflicts. But majority of those people, they left their countries, the lack of welfare system in those countries and lack of respect to human rights. So I would like to take into account the main problem in post-Soviet countries in the east of Europe. This is ruling regimes and the promotion of respect to human rights. When the people in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, in Central Asian countries, in Belarus, in Russia, they suffer the repressive regime, prosecution in these countries. How Václav Havel described in his speech in Salzburg conference, the fear atmosphere established in those countries, then people, the member of civil society group, people from political movement, people, different types of category, they decide to go to Eden, to continue their life in Eden. But why they decided? Because of internal problems. So I think EU policy should be more concrete and more comprehensive on promotion of human rights in those countries. So why, as mentioned by my colleagues Ales Bialitski, the very ongoing good relationship with dictators in post-Soviet types of country, it should be somehow replaced by more restricted the policy. When people here in Europe, in some politicians, stakeholders, they sharing their concerns why people leaving their country and coming to this continent, and it should be also understandable that those people, they suffered this regime, and this process resulted as a result of repression. So I think another problem in terms of EU policy is also asylum issues, which we observed during last 2015 surge from east. So there should be also somehow centralized asylum policy in transit countries, and it's very important that the migration policy should be the base and should be designed between source, transit, and receiving countries. So I'm not expert on migration policy, but I have some concerns shared with you. And when we talk in terms of migration issues, my concern always focused on freedom of movement and respect to human rights in transit countries, in third world countries, and also in post-Soviet countries. Maybe I will continue later during the meeting.
Thank you very much. So now we are to focus the perspective a little bit more to the south. We heard two points or two contributions from the post-Soviet territory. Now we will go to post-Yugoslav space, which certainly is a different origin of the story. So, Gordana.
I have already talked in a quite dire circumstances about media freedom in the Balkans, but maybe for this purpose of this debate, it's better to focus now a little bit about enlargement policy of EU. Where are these countries that are leftovers of Yugoslavia, and how real and true actually the all talk about joining EU is, both by EU officials and actually by the public. You probably know, and maybe not, that Croatia and Slovenia already have joined EU, leaving behind trouble in some countries with quite a difficult internal lack of democracy and different issues. Mostly in Macedonia, my colleague will talk about something else which relates to other international players like Greece and the name and disputing the names and why this actually stalled that process of accession. But currently, especially after UK decided to leave, we started in the Balkans asking ourselves how actually really is possible that we join. We feel that there is in the European Union countries actually big disappointment, disillusion, and actually anti-enlargement mood. And feel there is a strong, I would say also, feeling that EU should first consolidate and then maybe deal with the UK Brexit, and then think about accepting new players. This message then is accepted in the Balkans with certain confusion, because until now we always functioned like a carrot and a stick. Carrot was like, let's join EU, and then our governments had to fulfill some things to be able to actually join. But now, nor carrot is serious or sweet, or the stick doesn't exist. And all these chapters that are open, and some countries want to go forward with that, actually the essence of them are ruining the powerful governments that they have to fulfill. I don't know how clear that is, but if you have an open chapter like in Serbia and talk about the rule of law, and at the same time your government is saying that it wants to go join EU and abusing the police forces, abusing judiciary, there is no independent rule of law, it's a question like, what's the interest of that group in power to actually fulfill this? So it's kind of play of game, it's theater play, where we are a little bit stuck as in purgatory, as our colleague said, thinking about what is going to come now. And in the light, especially I want to underline that light of Russia playing now a significant influence, especially in the media. So we do have internationally our leader going and talking about wish to join EU, but all tabloids, popular TV stations, and mainstream media are constantly daily publishing pro-Russian emotional brotherhood stories and criticizing EU that wants to undermine Serbian democracy. So that's kind of a very interesting time to live in. And who would say that second time in my life I would have to go through the same populistic, nationalistic drama with the same actually actors and the people. I would maybe end this, because I believe that we should maybe even hurry, by the fact the Serbian parliament now has 75% of the MPs actually did participate in 90s during the war through that warmongering propaganda and ran the war in 90s. And they're all now pro-Europeans officially. I think that's kind of picture that I'm painting from Serbia. I don't want to enter into Bosnian case because that's then all afternoon talk. But let me give that to Sasha.
Thank you. This is a quick tour d'horizon. And now the last but not least a perspective from a country, the name of which already reflects on the bizarreness of our realities. It was said this struggle for the simple title Macedonia is, I think, telling us something too. Saso Ordanoski.
Yes, thank you. Look, when I saw the map, I saw that we are actually south of Eden. They're east of Eden. But the thing is that there is no difference from south to east to the west of Eden. We're in the same trouble. And there is one thing which, since we have 5 minutes, I don't have time for long stories, but what I would like to point out is that this crisis, which is now looming around the world, is not like anything before. Not because the human tragedy per se is different than in the 19th or 4th century, not because of the wars which are never ending and migrations which are coming in many more flows and numbers, but because this time we have something very specific which is totally different than ever before. We have internet. Now, internet is the key tool which is going to kill the democracy. It would take another symposium to explain my point of view. I'm a member of a very tiny minority of people who actually believe that this is going to be the end of the liberal democracy as we know it. But the basic for the topic of this, for the issue of this conference is that internet is on a online basis updating world's tragedies to everyone in the world. That have never been before. That has never happened before. Why is it important? Because it is, you have 300 million people in India without approach to a clean water, but all of these 300 million people have 1 or 2 mobiles in their pockets. And if you ask them, would you prefer clean water or mobile, I would say that majority of them would vote for a mobile phone. So this kind of personalization of tragedies, you see, in democracy, certain things needs to have an abstract level. When you get them on the level of a very personal stories, the story of our Yazidi girl is a story of everyday home in Macedonia because we've seen her, we heard her words. This kind of personalization of tragedy spreads fear among people. Fear is a very basic sentiment which is in essence very anti-democratic. Why? Because democracy works on the basis of hopes. Anti-democrats work on the basis of fears. As a result of that, people are getting more and more in a pursuit for their security, for the security of their families, for the security of their nation, for the security of their religious group, and so on and so forth. That, combined with the economic crisis, is a perfect storm for anti-democratic movements. As a result of that, we are getting leaders because people vote for that kind of leaders who are guaranteeing security. People are not stupid. They ask for responsibility, but in order to ask for responsibility, they want to give a full power to the undemocratic leader, because that's how they believe that he will then extend the full power in defending from their fears. As a result of that, we have this kind of Michael Ignatieff is not here, but his famous theory about the internalization of autocratic regimes. You have, in Macedonia, the country which is ruled by a very undemocratic regime, actually a criminal regime, mafia, and they see Putin and Erdogan as, and to an extent Orban, of course, as a kind of idealistic models of how the country should be run. The basic of the managed democracy, the Putin theory and the Putin style of democracy, is that the leader takes his sovereignty from the people, not from the laws. And because he takes his sovereignty power from the people directly, then he is above the law. If he gets in conflict with the law is the one which needs to change, not him. So, and he is the only one, because he's getting his sovereignty from the people, who can actually tell what the law says. So these people are generally beyond the law. They cannot be then, and then there is the whole scheme and structure of how these countries are governed and how the whole power trickles down to the very. Of course, it is based on a large scheme of clientelism. Many people have vested interest in this kind of regime for small securities. Look, not too many people in Russia nor in Macedonia are stealing millions. But a lot of them are actually getting into a position where they can secure their everyday life up to the family, up to the little bit larger group. And then we come with this kind of a super kind of threat to this kind of stability of the migrants, immigration, and so on and so forth. A lot of people told enough on this subject before me, so I would just like to underline that as a result of this, there is another phenomenon which I find very crucial. Democrats in Europe especially, but around the world as well, stopped to want to fight anti-democrats. Today, Democrats in Europe are actually, sorry?
Enabling them.
Yeah, Democrats do not want to go on the streets and to fight physically for democracy. That's something which we see in separate cases. Some people, this is not an easy thing. I'm not advocating civil wars, but the fact of the matter is that when you are kind of, accommodated in this thing that, I will write my column on the internet and that's enough. I will take part on this conference in front of these 100 people and that's enough. You see, anti-democrats are ready and on the streets. Putin's legions are ready and on the streets. They don't care, they're not afraid of fighting for their ideas. That's why, I'm trying not to go in radical positions in being optimist or pessimist. I'm usually trying to be in the middle, trying to be a realist in these kind of things. But from that position, I don't think that the whole thing is going in a good direction. I can tell you that I can only expect worst news to come. And I'm afraid that this kind of a democratic order, liberal democracy, will have to redefine itself in a very difficult circumstances. To end on a high note with the low hard news, I will just tell you what happened yesterday. Yesterday, a new judge of the European Court for Human Rights was elected by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which is a co-organizer of this. The guy is he's Macedonian, and he is the chief prosecutor for the organized crime in Macedonia. The guy is part of the mafia, never actually did anything against the organized crime in Macedonia. That's why now we have a special prosecutor, which was elected as a result of this huge political crisis we're in. But the Council of Europe happily voted for this guy, who is a direct extension, who is, by the way, married with the daughter with the sister of the chief of the Secret Service boss, wife. So he's, we suddenly got the news yesterday and he was not the best one chosen by the Commission in the European Council, there was another lady which was much better proposition coming from Macedonia. Nevertheless, what does it mean? It means that today, in these regimes in Eastern Europe and in the Balkans, it's much more important to be a member of European People's Parties group than to listen what European Commission says. So it means that it's much more important to be part of your conservative grouping in Europe, which spans from radical conservatism to something to moderate conservatism, than actually to see your perspective into the European Union, Helsinki-based, this, that, blah, blah, blah. This is the reality we live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have still 18 minutes and we'd like to open it to the floor. But before that, one more quick round. I said in my opening speech, I remember the Helsinki process of the past. Obviously, when it started in the late 70s and it went on and on throughout the 1980s, we also heard the arguments of sovereignty of states, and there were many, many efforts to weaken this perspective from below as a part of the European political process. But in the end of the day, I can think about Charter 77, which is going to celebrate the 40th anniversary next year. It had certain impact, and as a follow-up of that, in this moment, it was believed that policy from below can do something. It looks like now, when we look back from 2016 perspective, that this idealistic spirit somewhat evaporated, and we have many reasons to be Cassandras today, as we had a chance to listen to the participants in this debate. But I also hear that there are still some leftovers, remnants of this spirit, maybe NGOs, maybe us sitting here. There are some interactions from below. Do you believe that they can be made more effective now in the moment of need? Obviously, we also have internet. It's not only a weapon in the hands of illiberal governments, but it can be used responsibly. How do you see it from your perspective? I would like you to give us a quick answer so that we can open it later to the public. And again, we'll start from Aleš.
Ну, я считаю, да.
I think that yes, it is possible. In my country, we have been using very actively the internet to promote liberal and democratic ideas and to promote human rights. It is the only platform that is possible in the times when the government is silent about these issues. We have been using the internet actively. In my country, there are very few independent media, but there are some. And there are a sort of barrier against the Russian propaganda that comes from the East and that communicates about the Russian world and treats our countries as a historical paradox. For instance, what happened in Ukraine, in Georgia in 2008, it is seen by Russia as a sort of alert for all the other post-Soviet countries. And the fact that we have at our disposal the internet, that means that we have more opportunities to communicate information on democracy. So we have been using actively the internet.
Yes, internet and social media is main tools right now expressing alternative voices, independent voices in Azerbaijan. Since 1993, when the Haydar Aliyev came to power, one family, before 10 years, the Haydar Aliyev, father Aliyev, and 13 years son Aliyev, Ilham Aliyev, ruled Azerbaijan. And during these 23 years, all independent TV channels, newspapers, and journalists. They were under control, prosecuted, and two very popular, prominent journalists killed during these 23 years. And many bloggers, the Facebook activists, they arrested, or they left country, they became migrants in Europe. So in such fear atmosphere, of course, YouTube is our independent TV channel. Twitter is our independent radio, or I don't know, free space for sharing and reaching people. So in such circumstance, I should say that despite the fact that political movement, political groups, and civil society organization became big crackdown in the last 3 or 5 years, I should say that we have some good signal, we have some hope that there are tendency among young generation on modernization, on the future of country. So the people who became the part of virtual or social media, they somehow integrated themselves with global world, with Europe, and they can very easily compare what is ongoing process around Azerbaijan and what happened Arab Spring, how is achievement of other societies who got democracy. So I think, yes, there is just small window right now which gives us some freedoms, and we can use these tools.
Thank you.
The question I understand is, can we do something as human rights activists to contribute to international justice? Of course, we would not work in this field if we would think that there is no chance to promote our ideas. I also think that we should not give up so easily to that international justice being established. And I'm optimist because I actually lived through the years when I also thought, oh, that's the end of the world during our wars in the Balkans. But then, with the big pressure of international, actually, human rights activists, we did have set up that ICTY in the Hague court. And despite all the weaknesses that that court actually exercised, we do have many people sentenced there. We have documents for the future that generation can see, and it is possible. And that's how I answered to Nadia and her colleague when they asked me, oh, are we going to succeed? I do believe that if we actually talk and work and lobby, we are able to achieve something, at least institutionalized more. And to me, it's more about a reworking set of consequences in International Criminal Court and the states to be able to actually change something, but not to give up.
Thank you.
Yes, very shortly. You see, societies are more and more fractionalized. That's why internet is very important, because it is actually making huge decompartment of the societies. For democracy to work, you need a social contract. You need people to agree how we are going to run the country. In the fractionalized society, the lowest common denominator for the social contract is security. That's why I'm saying that when you start from the security, then it's easy to manipulate anti-democratic ideas. That's one point. The other point is that, look, the idea of humanity and democracy and so on, so it's a cycle idea. Now we are on the very bottom to this idea, and I'm sure, as Gordana said, that in some future we'll come again to the high standards of this and that. But do not forget, the world usually changes the phases after big calamities and after big unpleasant climaxes. So that's why I'm a kind of a realist saying that we have not reached this calamity. You know, next time, because this time it seems to me that Trump is going to lose this battle, but next time they are going to get a little bit more clever candidate in Washington to replace Trump, and then we are going to be in a big trouble, as I know that you're going to push the button, as we are going to be in a big trouble when Merkel leaves. Because look, a small combination of economic crisis and more migrants in Germany without Merkel, as a metaphor, then we are going to have a big trouble in Europe. Thank you.
Okay, we have 6-7 minutes. I see Michael Żandowski looking at his watch. So let's open it now to public. Please first introduce yourselves and then eventually tell us whom you are addressing your question to. Who wants to start? Minister Schwarzenberg?
I have to contradict my old friend Aleš, because as far as I'm informed, also I was taught in my lessons of religion, out of purgatorium is only one exit, and that's into heaven. The purgatorium we are speaking of has an exit to hell too, and that we should be always aware. And then, as far as I'm informed, they never tell you in heaven, stay where you are. You are anyway accustomed to hell, so be content to be in the purgatorium. We have no need for you here. That's the little difference. And you see, I don't see, I would like to oppose my Macedonian journalist too, a circle. I'm afraid it's a spiral. It remembers the circle, but it always still chance getting more down and down and down. But you realized what's the real problem. We are not ready to fight. And that's, if you look at the European Union, we are not ready to fight for human rights, each of us. We are not even ready to fight in countries which are allied with, as long as they don't touch our immediate interests. We gave up the fight for human rights. There's a big difference between the 80s and even 90s and today. And I'm afraid the spiral is going down to hell. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep your remarks to your final statements, because this was practically not a question, but very important opinion. Okay, so this is a question, but it will be maybe addressed to you in your final statement. Another contribution from the floor, from the audience. Very silent, no one is willing to. Okay, I see first and then, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me offer a follow-up on Mr. Schwarzenberg. What he said is quite clear. The world is going very fast into the hell. What should we do? Slow down. Put the foot on the brake. Can one of the panelists respond?
To respond in your final statement.
Aleksander Kaczorowski. I would like to ask Aleš Białacki, what's your opinion on the foreign policy of Poland towards Belarus, which is taking place just now and being done by contemporary Polish government and Polish foreign ministry. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, final round. You have 1 minute to react to the questions from the floor and to say whatever you want to say.
You see, the Polish-Belarusian relations have become much more active recently. And we see now that we are receiving visitors from Poland almost every week in Belarus. Let me repeat once more. When the relations between the two countries are stronger, then human rights issues are usually neglected. We have spotted this and we are worried. This is hard to understand because in the past, Poland used to adopt a very strong position on human rights. Nowadays, this is different, and this is worrisome. Let's hope that business is not going to push aside the issues of values, that they will still be important between our two countries.
The previous statement, I should say that EU and Western countries should consider on very serious measures regarding the ruling regimes in those countries outside of Europe where there are problems on protection of human rights and democratic institutions. So internal problems of those countries cannot be solved through internal way. This is those continents, the member of post-Soviet countries or some other countries, they are also member of universal principle. They should respect human rights. Otherwise, today in the problems of Syria, tomorrow will be moved to Iran, or after tomorrow will be moved to Central Asia. So those problems should be considered by Western countries beforehand, and there should be some serious measures in terms of social policy.
Thank you. Gordana.
Obviously, I was always of stance that, especially in the field of journalism, that I'm coming from, individual effort. Each person actually needs to put individual effort and to fight for what really cares for, and that would amount to compassion that was actually mentioned today, and not giving up, that's all. I don't see actually currently any states being able to, and politicians, the European Commission and anyone who would really help truly, but our pressure, individual pressure, might change that. I know this sounds like maybe fairy tale, but I lived that life, and I did actually witness the change, and I am going to fight as long as I exist. So I would recommend everybody to try that, to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, finally, I'm also a journalist, so I'm fighting on my personal level a lot. The problem is that not only, you see, in democracy, we do not teach kids to fight. We teach them that the state is there to protect their rights and blah, blah, blah. Even in aspiring democracies like countries where we are coming from, we are not teaching kids to fight. So it's not only that Mr. Schwarzenberg's generation is finished. My generation is not going to fight. I'm 52 years old, and I have 5 kids. And we are not teaching them to fight. We are teaching them to be in the third row when the fight starts. That's how democracy is losing, and that's how, when it comes, it will take some time for this third row, fifth row, and the 100th row to understand that they will really have to fight for their rights and for the rights of others, and to really fight it, not just to write Twitters and post on the internet. Thank you.
These people who I think know what they are talking about, and that's why they deserve a round of applause. Thank you very much.